Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel addressed the effects of climate change on the world's security environment during a speech yesterday at the Conference of Defense Ministers of the Americas in Peru. During that speech, the Secretary announced a Defense Department climate change adaptation roadmap. Secretary Hagel said climate change has the potential to exacerbate many of the challenges the world already confronts, from the spread of infectious diseases to spurring armed conflicts.
World leaders are gathering in New York for a climate summit at the United Nations on Tuesday. And today, hundreds of thousands of demonstrators gathered in cities around the world to demand faster action to reduce carbon emissions. Last week, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration said this summer was the hottest on record and that this year is likely to be the hottest ever. Reported hundreds of thousands of people marched today in New York and in other cities around the world, demanding that world leaders do more to halt climate change. For more, we are joined by Catherine Bagley. She is a reporter with Inside Climate News. So before getting into today's march, where is the world when it comes to taking action on climate change?
So there's no global agreement on what to do about climate change, which is one of the things they're going to be hashing out on Tuesday at the UN. But a lot of individual countries have decided to take action themselves, and a lot of the action has been in Europe. A lot of European countries are really on top of this. A lot of the island nations like the Maldives that are literally disappearing into the ocean are taking action. But there's a lot of big carbon dioxide polluters that aren't. The U.S., for example, there's no national initiative on climate change. China hasn't really done anything. Canada, Australia, Russia, also India. A lot of people are going to be paying attention to these big countries to see, how committed they are on this, because they haven't really been in the past.
So you were out there at the march. You've been covering this for a while, all the organizing that went back into it. What was the purpose of today's march?
So the purpose of today was just to show world leaders how many disparate interests actually want them to act on climate change. They didn't have a set list of demands. They just wanted to show leaders how many people want action, any action on climate change.
And who are all these different groups? I mean, you said that there were hundreds just organizing this particular event.
So there were two main groups that organized it, Avaz and 350.org, but they've actually roped in over 1,500 different organizations. They started back in January, and this march has just grown beyond their wildest expectations. And you even saw within the last month that it went from 750 organizations to 1,500 organizations in just a couple of weeks.
And it's not just environmental organizations that are participating?
No, that's what makes the march so remarkable, is that for the first time in the climate fight, you're really seeing a visual demonstration of how many people from so many different organizations actually care about this.
Imagine that we live in an age of reason, and the global warming alarm is dressed up as science, but it's not science, it's propaganda.
There's no direct evidence which links 20th century global warming to anthropogenic greenhouse gases.
We're just being told lies. That's what it comes down to.
You can't say that CO2 will drive climate. It certainly never did in the past.
If the CO2 increases in the atmosphere as a greenhouse gas, then the temperature will go up. But the ice core record shows exactly the opposite. So the fundamental assumption, the most fundamental assumption of the whole theory of climate change due to humans is shown to be wrong.
The whole thing stinks.
Man-made global warming is no longer just a theory about climate. It is the defining moral and political cause of our age. Campaigners say the time for debate is over. Any criticism, no matter how scientifically rigorous, is illegitimate. Even worse, dangerous. That the Earth's climate is always changing. That there is nothing unusual about the current temperature, and that the scientific evidence does not support the notion that climate is driven by carbon dioxide, man-made or otherwise. Everywhere you are told that man-made climate change is proved beyond doubt. But you are being told lies.
Here of climate change. Professor Plummer. Well, thank you for coming. I'm a geologist. And the one thing that we miss out on in looking at climate change is the past. Climates have always changed. Climate changes in the past have been greater and faster than anything we experience in our lifetime. And sea levels have always changed, not by the modest couple of millimetres that people are having conniptions about, but we've had in the past sea level changes of only 1,500 metres. That's a sea level change. And if we look back in the history of time, the atmosphere once had a very large amount of carbon dioxide in it. It's now got less than 0.04%. Where did that carbon dioxide go to? It went into chalk, limestone, shells and life. This planet has been degassing carbon dioxide since it first formed on that thing. And we now are at a dangerously low level. If we halved the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, we would have no terrestrial plants. Carbon dioxide is plant food. It is not a pollutant. To use words like pollution with carbon dioxide is misleading and deceptive.
Burning fossil fuels releases carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide traps heat. Levels of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere are higher than they've been in 800,000 years. We know the trends. The 18 warmest years on record have all happened since you graduates were born. We also have to realize, as hundreds of scientists declared last month, that climate change is no longer a distant threat, but has moved firmly into the present. That's a quote. In some parts of the country, weather-related disasters like droughts and fires and storms and floods are going to get harsher, and they're going to get costlier. And that's why today I'm announcing a new $1 billion competitive fund to help communities prepare for the impacts of climate change and build more resilient infrastructure across the country.
The calendar says it's 6 weeks until winter, but apparently nobody told the jet stream, which is dipping south out of the Arctic tonight, bringing with it a massive blast of frigid air, as well as the first major snow of the season. All of this the result of that typhoon, the biggest storm on the planet this year. We've been watching it all week. It turned into the most powerful storm to hit Alaska in decades. Then it blew heavy snow across Canada. And right now it is barreling into the lower 48. ABC's Alex Perez starts us off tonight from Chicago.
A blast of winter barreling through Canada and into the U.S. tonight. At Calgary International Airport, visibility down as the storm swallows the city. Driving there, also a challenge. Winter weather arriving early across the country. In Soda Springs, California, this ski resort has already gotten more than 10 inches of snowfall. But in the Midwest and parts of Minnesota, they're expecting more than a foot of snow and plunging temperatures to start the work week. In Wisconsin, salt trucks and plows already on standby. Last week, Nuri, more than 800 miles wide, battered the Alaskan islands with near 100-mile-per-hour winds and waves at least 50 feet high. The crews on the fishing boats from Discovery's Deadliest Catch scrambling to stay safe.
We don't need to get anybody hurt and just get home safe.
Nuri is one of the most powerful storms ever recorded. The size and strength helped push the jet stream very far to the north. And what comes up must come down. The result? A big dip in the jet stream over the eastern two-thirds of the U.S., which opens the gate for that Arctic air to plunge southward this week.
That unwelcome storm, the brutal cold snap across much of the Midwest and sweeping south tonight. 200 million Americans will feel this, and just take a look at the wall. This is the view through this driver's windshield in Michigan tonight. Whiteout conditions across several states. And there was a harrowing moment in Minnesota. You're about to see an officer who pulled over to help a driver when a tractor trailer comes barreling in. Just incredible there on your screen. Luckily, no one was seriously injured, but a real reminder of the dangers of winter driving. The deep freeze will send temperatures plummeting as much as 30 degrees below normal all the way down to the Gulf. Ginger Z is standing by, but we begin with ABC's Alex Perez in the middle of the storm.
The Midwest taking a beating tonight. Marquette, Michigan buried under more than 2 feet of snow and still falling. Drivers venturing out to find covered and slick roads. Those powerful snowstorms heading east today. In Wisconsin, some places seeing more than a foot. Here in Minnesota, more than 580 crashes and 786 spinouts reported. Car after car, no match for this slippery hill in Duluth. An exhausting 24 hours for Minnesota snowplow truck drivers. Tonight, we rode with driver Tim Nygren, who says this snowstorm was one of the worst he's seen so early in the season.
What you had plowed once that looked good, now it's all covered again.
With plunging temperatures now in the forecast, the big concern for drivers, slick spots and potential for black ice.
Everybody forgets how to drive in it, and it's like getting back to snow driving 101, you know.
Most of Minnesota digging out today. In St. Cloud, they saw a record-breaking 13.2 inches. This front loader tipping from the weight of all that snow. And watch this close call for officers in Rogers, Minnesota. They're responding to a jackknife semi when another semi barrels right into them. The road, a sheet of ice. Thankfully, no serious injuries. But
yeah, tremendous tumble in temperatures is the first thing I have to show you. Not just alliteration, but just really smacking everybody in the face there in the plains. Wichita had a record high on Monday of 77, but watch what happens in the next 36 hours. More than 60-degree temperature drop. Oklahoma City tomorrow, 22 degrees as we wake up. The freeze warnings, the hard freeze warnings are in place from New Mexico all the way to parts of Louisiana and southwestern Arkansas. And that freezing line, where we take the actual temperature to 32, makes it close to Dallas early tomorrow morning. Just goes right past it and into the 20s in North Texas. Look how far that purple extends into New England. Pretty